Okay, here we go. So, welcome to Auroral Comics. My name is Carla Madrano, aka Moon the Storyteller. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a nurse, and also I'm the creator of Luna, the Queen of Maru, an award-winning comic book series from Concrete Comics.
Hi, my name is Dr. Ebony Toussaint, and I'm also a wife and a mom, and I'm a research scientist who investigates faith, food, and Black futures. This is a safe space where we will discuss the intersection of health, culture, and of course, comics.
All right. Yay. And also we're going to be discussing Black maternal health, DEI, Black Twitter, Storm, X-Men. We're going to be discussing a whole lot of stuff. So, buckle in, hold on tight. All right. So our first story centers around Black Maternal Health Week. So, as a nurse, um, Black Maternal Health Week is something that I love the focus that we are paying are giving to this important topic because Black women are still dying from childbirth, and of course, we have situations where rare situations, exceptions across the board, regardless of race, culture. But it seems like with Black women, because of the history of not listening to us and trusting us and believing us, there seems to be kind of an overwhelming amount of deaths of impacted that Black women are impacted by. So the first story here I wanted to kind of talk about was the former Kansas City Chiefs cheerleader Crystal Anderson dies from sepsis after giving birth. So when you looked at this story, what were your thoughts?
I think my first thought was Serena Williams, who had similar experience giving birth and people not listening to her. And I think what many Black women's like very visceral reaction was that if Serena Williams isn't gonna be listened to, then I don't stand a chance. And
Mhm.
we're seeing that with many Black and brown women throughout the United States on the regular in comparison with other developed nations. Like it just doesn't make any sense, the level of maternal mortality here. And then when you parse out that level of maternal mortality and look at Black and brown women. So that was my first thought was Serena Williams and how she thought, honestly, some of her work thought that we would be able to create and tailor different interventions to prevent this from happening or at least lessen the maternal mortality, especially in Black women. But what we're seeing is likely AI and technology. And I'm not saying it's not going to help, but it's not the root cause of what we're seeing. So when I saw Crystal Anderson, I'm like, here's somebody who likely did make good income and have access to health care. My mind always goes to what about rural Black women? Because a lot of my research focuses on the American South. So I'm thinking immediately South Carolina, places like Mississippi,
Mhm.
Alabama, who, so it's just incredibly sad to see.
It is. And I think a common argument to kind of dismiss this idea that Black this week is very important. There's a lot of people that always kind of dismiss our issues and our concerns, and one of those common dismissals centers around, oh well, Black women are just generally unhealthy,
Mm.
high blood pressure, overweight, they don't eat well. And that's some of the things that, we've seen being in and around nursing. So, but still, Serena Williams is one of the most healthiest women in the world, right? And Crystal Anderson is a former cheerleader. So that argument doesn't stand.
Even Beyonce had preeclampsia. She had to
Yep.
have a C-section with the twins.
Mhm.
So it's just like you said, the stereotype doesn't stand. And especially even our framing, even just I can go after research scientists, here a little bit. Our framing of the problems, again, always target the individual instead of looking at the systemic level structure, systemic racism, looking at the institutions and not blaming patients and their communities. It's ineffective. Like I said, it doesn't get to the problem. So with the case of Crystal Anderson, like we have this healthy cheerleader and she goes into multiple organ failure and has multiple surgeries and they're not able to locate the source of the infection. It's like who's to blame for that?
Mm-hmm.
It's this mother who was seeking care, lost her child at only in just entering,
Mm-hmm.
her second trimester. Good. Usually, we're at a point where people start showing and start telling, friends and families, around the 20-week mark. So she went in around 21 weeks. Like it's just, again, I think some of it we always talk about health literacy or health behaviors and patients, but I'm always gonna go for clinicians and scientists or people who are both clinician and scientists and looking at how are we communicating the science and how are we even telling people that these risk factors exist.
Mm-hmm.
What if she was more likely to succumb to certain infections or what things were specific to her pregnancy, her birthing experience. So I mean, these questions, these are the first things that I thought about, and just
Mm-hmm.
seeing this young woman who, star athlete, and again, multiple athletes. I think there was the case of another athlete that was a track star found dead after several hours alone. Had a stroke
Mm-hmm.
and her baby died. I can't recall her name right now, but the idea was that this Black woman, this star athlete, died alone. And she was
Mm-hmm.
so far along in her pregnancy, maybe 8 months or so. I gotta find her name.
And it's it's really sad when you read the story because this story is from ABC News. And I know obviously the family, her husband has not shared all the details with the media, but it says what I found interesting was that number one, the cause of death was sepsis. So
Mm,
for people who don't know what sepsis is a systemic infection that gets into your bloodstream, that gets into your tissues, and it's really hard to reverse if you don't catch it early enough. And there are signs that you're going into sepsis. We look at the temperature, we look at the blood pressure, and we also look at the lab work, right? So there's a different things that doctors have to kind of catch this early on. What I found interesting was in her 16th week, Crystal underwent a cerclage procedure to ensure that her cervix will remain viable for the remainder of the pregnancy. So she had an invasive procedure a few weeks before she died. So I'm not saying that something happened during that procedure, but something might have happened that introduced some bacteria that should not have been there. And it was just kind of a slow process. And, being pregnant, we as women kind of dismiss certain things. Like we kind of dismiss if we're feeling extra tired, we dismiss if, we're dizzy or something like that. But, I don't really think there's anyone to blame for this tragedy. But I can see how symptoms could have been possibly dismissed as, oh, you're just pregnant. Oh, that's normal.
Oh, that's
Um,
normal for this procedure. It's normal to experience some pain and pressure there. And to your
mhm,
point, I'm not understanding how they could not locate the source of the infection. I hadn't seen the cerclage thing the procedure that you're mentioning that preceded her death. That adds additional context and layers because again,
right.
not blaming the surgeons here or her obstetrics and gynecology team, but it does, like you said, that's very invasive. One of my sisters had that procedure to carry
Mhm,
my nephew after having multiple miscarriages. So I'm
mhm.
curious about her previous medical history.
Yeah,
And was this even a good option for her, that procedure, like you said, because we're looking at a source of infection they could not find and then multiple organ failure, which
yeah,
led, sepsis. Like,
yeah. It wasn't caught in time, and that's unfortunate. And I feel like providers, gynecologists, primary care doctors, they could do this is a learning, something that they can learn from, educating women um, on their options during pregnancy. But also, not being so quick to kind of dismiss things, because you don't go from being healthy to the next day having multiple organ failure. That has not been seen or proven. We know as healthcare professionals, there's a process to when someone goes through local, the body goes through a local infection and then grows to a systemic infection. So I just, prayers for her family. That is a really sad, tragic case. And, we think about our own pregnancies and some of the complications that we've had and experienced. I had a complicated labor. My pregnancy was like easy, right? But I had a complicated labor, which it resulted in having a C-section. But I had a really great gynecologist. He was a man of color. He was a Latino, and he was like, "Listen, your fluid is low. We're going to give the Pitocin, which is a way to induce labor. We're going to give it a few hours. But if it doesn't work, you're doing a C-section." And I was like, "Okay." And my baby, was I had a C-section, and now my baby is 11 years old. You
I do
know,
wonder though about your birthing experience. Thank you for sharing that. It does make me think though, how many women are just told you're getting a C-section without the ability to engage. You're a healthcare provider yourself, so just being able to engage back and forth and say, well, can we address, other alternatives first, or even just people talk about having the presence of a doula. Where in states like Alabama, they just ban doulas, and so it just makes me think like how different your experience
they
may
banned
have
doulas.
been.
What? In
Yeah,
Texas?
Alabama.
Alabama? Why?
Girl, I'll share that article, but that's the prevailing and persistent question is why, when the presence of doulas may have, it may improve birthing outcomes. And I'm not sure of the literature in that area, but I mean, certainly you wouldn't think that their presence would be more harmful. So whether or not the benefit is neutral, it certainly wouldn't be more harmful to have doulas present. But Alabama, like I said, a place with rural, a lot of Black people, a lot of negative outcomes, you would think that. So it just made me think about when you just shared your birthing experience. And honestly, I count my lucky stars and blessings, thank you, Jesus, that I had 3 uneventful pregnancies and labors.
Oh,
So
good.
just when people ask, I'm like, I just got lucky. I can't think of anything, and I'm just blessed. Those are the only 2 things I can even say because it's not like you said, it's not like I did anything, or women who have different birthing outcomes did something wrong. Because that's the first thing, especially as women, we'll ask, like, well, what did I do wrong? That's usually a question I've seen
Hmm.
or people say on social media about their experiences, like, what could I have done differently, or what did I do wrong? And the fact of the matter is, I mean, some of it's going to be underlying different biological factors, but we're seeing more and more environmental factors. And like I said, those systemic stuff can't be denied. People's
Hmm.
food, access to health care and health insurance, transportation. We call all of these like enabling services in health services research. If people don't have access to those, what's
Hmm.
their housing looking like? Like,
Right.
just different stuff that we know impacts people, their environment. Where do they live? Are they in an urban area that's heavily polluted? They have clean water. Just so many things I think some of us can take for granted sometimes.
Yeah.
It just makes me reflect on my own birthing experiences and the access to quality care. Like you said, my OB up in Maryland was a Black woman. My OB here is a white woman, and she's just been phenomenal. She also participated in the White Coats for Black Lives
Hmm.
campaign. I know there's like apps and things like that, like Health in Her Hue, where they try to do some type of like racial and gender concordance for healthcare. But one of the things I really loved is when I did go to look up my OB when we moved to South Carolina, I was like, wait, let me see what her personal profile is looking like, not just how she's presenting in clinical
Hmm.
spaces. And when I saw that she was a white coat for Black Lives and that she was advocating maternal mortality and Black maternal health, I was like, okay, I can give her a try.
Good, good, good. I'm glad that your birthing experience was a positive one, and now you have 3 beautiful babies. Another story, beauty influencer Jessica Pettway died of cervical cancer following a misdiagnosis. Now, I didn't get a chance to read up on this article, but it says that she died on March 11th at the age of 36 after being diagnosed with stage 3 cervical cancer. And her death came about 9 months after she shared her cancer diagnosis with her followers. The mother of two said that she had been first misdiagnosed with fibroids, typically benign uterine tumors, before finding out in February of 2023 that the tumors were malignant. So this story actually is very close to my heart because I'm going through, just to be kind of very transparent, I'm going through perimenopause right now. So I have issues, I have some issues, gynecological issues. But my gynecologist is like right on top of it. She's like, this is what we're gonna do. This is how we're gonna handle it. If it doesn't resolve in this and on this date, I want you to come and make an appointment. So she's very proactive and more so than me. Like she's more concerned than me because of my age. I'm 43. I did have a gynecological procedure last year that kind of like, pushed me into this perimenopause. So my gynecologist is like very proactive, and she's white. She's a white woman, but like you said, because sometimes the race really doesn't matter with some of these healthcare providers as long as they're doing what they should be doing, and encouraging you to ask the right
And if
questions.
she knows the data and knows the population, like, okay, you're a Black
Mhm.
woman, you're 43, like, let's make sure we explore your options, like you said, and she's on top of it for you so she doesn't miss something. Because even in the case we just talked about with Crystal Anderson, there had to be, like we said, knowing the process of organ failure and sepsis, we know there had to
Mhm.
be missed signs and symptoms. And so, same thing with Jessica. How do we get a misdiagnosis? So we got missed signs, symptoms, now we got misdiagnosis. In another case, in 36, she's just 1 year older than me. So
Mhm.
it was just incredibly young. And I remember messaging my OB right away to say, hey, I'm just realizing it's time for my annual well woman checkup. Like, yes, let's
Mhm.
make sure you're looking at my cervix and I'm getting like a pelvic exam and all the things. Am I up to date on my immunization? Even though I know I am, it just still triggered like, wait a minute, she's 1 year older than me.
Right.
She was a
And
mom
she's
of two.
young.
I'm a mom of three. I need to make sure. And I think this even also goes to my work is in vaccine preventable diseases. And it's like here we have a vaccine that's been tested and reliable for decades. Um, to prevent cancer, literally the HPV vaccine. I think people
Mhm.
forget that it's
Yeah,
for
that's a
both
good point.
genital warts and cervical cancer. And I don't know her vaccine history, so that's not where I was trying to make this direction of this conversation go, but just making me think of awareness of people being aware of these different things that exist. Did she know this exists? Was she immunized? What again, we got missed signs and symptoms, and not only that, misdiagnosis. So it just
Mhm.
made me think about preventable like public health and nursing efforts that we can do. But also get on the part of her providers and care team who maybe they didn't listen to her. And like you said, some we put it on sometimes we have this we say superhero or Black woman superhero type of thing or Black girl magic, that kind of stuff. But none of that,
Mhm.
this, I just cannot take that on. I don't want us to take on that and that burden of saying like, oh, it's us saying that, oh, we're okay, it's all right, everything's okay, or oh, it's just a little bit of pain, because it's not just us, but I think it's just how our society treats and values women. So I think it's a larger problem, and it's not just Black women being strong and not going to the doctor. Like we can't take on all of the onus of honestly decades and centuries of not valuing women and women not getting the
Mhm.
check. I mean, look at even research studies, again, like just clinical research left out women, just any woman for decades. It wasn't until the 80s when even like the largest producer of biomedical research in the world, the NIH, was starting to use and be more intentional about women's participation in clinical research. Think about all the drugs and the studies and procedures and tools that were used on women that weren't tested in women to begin with when it got cleared
Mhm.
through the FDA. Like, make
Mhm.
it make sense. That doesn't
And
make
if
any
and if
sense.
they were used unethically. We have Henrietta Lack. You
Yeah.
know,
Heal us health.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, and to your point about the doctors really not kind of paying attention to Jessica's symptoms, it says that at one point she was rushed to the hospital where she was told the blood loss was due to fibroids, which develop in more than 80% of African American women by age 50. Her gynecolog, I have such a hard time with that word. Her gynecologist made her condition seem common despite having Pettway stay overnight due to the size of the blood clots she was passing. So one of the first questions doctors always ask you is how many pads do you go through an hour? How much are you bleeding? Are you passing like really tennis-sized, you know, clots? And the fact that they admitted her to and wanted to observe her means that the bleeding was significant. Um, but as her symptoms worsened, she was hospitalized again in January 2023. She said doctors told her she could not have surgery to remove her presumed fibroids because of her low blood supply. She received 10 blood transfusions. 10.
10.
Do you know how? Okay, so let me just put this in perspective. We usually transfuse blood when the hemoglobin is like around 7.
Mm-hmm.
Some may do 7.5, 7, but at 7, you're like, okay, we need to transfuse blood, right? So, and usually it's really 1 or 2 units,
Yep.
you know. So a unit is something like this. Like I got my Luna stickers. Like a unit is something like this, right? You see my head? Something like that, right? Um, the fact that she had 10 blood transfusions means that her hemoglobin and her hematocrit kept dropping, and they didn't think that they thought this was just all because of fibroids. That's not
Yeah.
that is not normal. So at that point they should have done a biopsy, but it wasn't until the next month, February 2023, did they do a biopsy, and then they discovered that she had stage 3. At this point, it was stage 3 cervical cancer. So unfortunately, she didn't make it. She didn't make it. It was at that point, it was too late. And she had nearly, when it was all said and done, she had nearly 20 blood infusions. Wow, that is terrible. That's terrible. Um, and just some statistics, according to the CDC, 58% of non-Hispanic Black women who are diagnosed with cervical cancer at an earlier stage live for 5 or more years. And Hispanic, Indigenous, and Black women are at higher rates of new cervical cancer compared to the women of other races. So we're at risk to have cervical cancer. So I'm gonna put my plug in there. Get your pap smears done. Get your pap smears done at a regular interval, whatever your healthcare provider recommends. Get your lab work, get STD tested, get just take care of yourself at the recommended intervals, you know. So that's another sad story. Another sad story that kind of centers around, black health. It's National Minority Health Month. So that was just really really sad. Really sad. You want to talk about Olivia Munn?
Oh, yes. And I have yet to shout out to Olivia Munn for being very transparent in her breast cancer journey. It actually reminded me to do the National Cancer Institute, which is an institute from the National Institutes of Health. So they have different focus areas for those that don't know, but specifically the National Cancer Institute, they have a breast cancer risk assessment tool. So her being transparent about her journey reminded me that I need to take this tool. I only have one history of breast cancer in my family, and it's my maternal great aunt, Aunt Estella Allen. I love you and miss you. And I still have her pearls. I wear them often, especially for special occasions. But Olivia Munn's journey to, her double mastectomy and deciding to do it was that was the best decision for her. Not only based on her genetics, but based on her risk assessment. And I believe she caught it early enough. So it was based on this tool and then her going to her provider and getting the subsequent blood work and examinations that she was able to see how early she was staged and able to then do the double mastectomy and hopefully have a much greater prognosis than she would have had she not done the risk assessment tool from the National Cancer Institute and had she not gone in for a consultation, done the blood work, gotten staged early now gotten a double mastectomy, which is just so incredibly brave. And just her vulnerability is just so commendable. She didn't have to share that with us. You know, celebrities already live very public lives in the eyes, the public eye. And so it was very nice of her to share that with her. So if you haven't seen her story, I would recommend going and looking at that on Instagram. And so she said that I hope by sharing this, it will help others find comfort, inspiration, and support on their journey. And so she just shared this about 4 weeks ago on
Mm-hmm.
March 13th. So she's looking
Mm-hmm.
very positive, and she's literally pictured in the hospital bed in the gown with the
Mm-hmm.
suction and oxygen supplies behind her. So we know this is
Mm-hmm.
real and not staged. And she
Mm-hmm.
also shares, so just to be more specific, so she tested negative for the 90 different cancer genes, including the BRCA, which is the most well-known breast cancer gene. And her sister tested negative as well. She said they high-fived, they had normal mammograms, but 2 months later, she was
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed with breast cancer. So again, the genetic component is important, but just also those risk factors. And so she just detailed her diagnosis of, crying and getting dressed to get out of the house and like the pain medication factors. And just that the fact that she said calculating the breast cancer risk assessment score saved her life.
Mm-hmm.
The different factors that it looks at is age, familial breast cancer history, having your first child after 30, and I believe her lifetime risk was calculated at 37%. And so it was based on the score and not her genetics, which led to her getting the MRI and the ultrasound. And then that led to the biopsy, which showed that she had luminal B cancer in both breasts. And so luminal B is an aggressive, fast moving cancer. 30 days after her biopsy, she had the double mastectomy. And yeah, so they said if your number is greater than 20%, y'all, if you take that risk assessment, then you need annual mammograms and breast MRIs starting at age 30.
All right. And that assessment is called the Breast Cancer Risk Assessment Score. It's a questionnaire you can take for free online. Just Google it. And as Ebony mentioned, if your score is greater than 20%, then you need to talk to your healthcare provider. Um, so I took the
Oh,
risk assessment, and I was 9%. I was 9%. I was actually, what? Why am I so high?
oh
But
goodness.
I think a part of my risk factor is that I had my first child after 30. Well, my only child after 30. So that raised my score as well. But I hope she comes back in the X-Men, kind of
Yeah.
reboot. Like she was really incredible at Psylocke. So I really would love to see her, kind of back in action. So this story, I'm really glad that is recovering. Well wishes to her as well. And just thank you for sharing her story. Thank you for sharing your story.
Hello?
Hey,
Okay, is it going?
yeah, it's recording. It's recording. Okay. All right. So it worked. I just wanted to make sure before we did a whole nother segment. We forgot. I cut it short before we mentioned therapy for Black girls, so we can go into that as well.
Okay.
So therapy for Black girls. That's something new. I haven't heard of that. So what's
Oh.
that all about?
I love therapy for Black girls, and they've been around for at least 5 years, I want to say, because they precede COVID. Because I specifically remember them getting me through my PhD program. Just in terms of feeling like a community, like a supportive community. And I listened to their podcast like every week during my PhD. It was definitely life-saving. And so they've also, one thing I love about them is because they focus on Black women and Black girl needs. I like that they even had an episode, for example, on eating disorders in Black culture, like even across the diaspora. And I want to say they had this uh, therapist from, I want to say she was based in Atlanta. I can't recall her name at the time, but I want to say she was Jamaican American. And so one of the things she talked about was, just, again, within the diaspora. So when we say Black, we mean the diaspora as a whole, Caribbean, the global South, African continent, as well as the US. And so I love that she brought in that kind of culture and just talking about our relationship with rice. And that episode spoke to me because I am a Gullah Geechee rice eating girl, okay? And so we eat rice, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack with butter. We got Hoppin' John, we got red rice. And so anyway, so she talked about Jamaican food, they have peas and rice, and how that ends up being like the whole plate is covered in rice and not just a small portion on like a fourth of the plate. And just the prevalence of that and how everybody consumes rice. And not to demonize rice, but it was just talking about portion sizes and how even within our cultures, though, you'll go home and say you do get an appropriate portion size, you'll still have like elders and aunties and grannies be like, oh, put more plate on, put more food on there, girl, you need to eat, you need to, fill out, like look at you, looking like it's thick, and everybody starts talking about your body and things like that. And so it's like, if you do and if you don't, you're still going to get comments from older relatives about your body and about how you going to get man there. You got to, you got to make sure you get thick up for your man and stuff like that. And got to have your children. And even once you have children, they're going to try to feed you again. And so I like that she kind of got at some of those unique challenges in the diaspora and Black households. And that's why I said my work is not just on, are we like food insufficiency? Are we getting enough to eat? In my research for what are we eating, looking at our foodways, like the cultural and social, like all these factors related to the production and the consumption of food. And so not just do we have enough, but when we are eating, what are we eating? What's the portions looking like? Have those foodways been disrupted? And so just shout out to Therapy for Black Girls, because again, mental health and like rest is just important. It was important then in my PhD journey. It's been important now as a postdoc as I transition to hopefully full-time faculty. But also in terms of mental health, rest and sleep hygiene is important for mental health. And so shout out to the NAP ministry. So go give them a follow, y'all. They both were founded and created by Black women. And so that's Therapy for Black Girls, and that's the NAP ministry.
Yeah, I was looking on their website when you sent me the link. I was like, oh, I've never heard of it before. But the algorithm doesn't really promote Black centered content anyway. But I clicked on the website. They have some really interesting blogs that I definitely want to highlight, in future shows. All right.
Oh, and I did, for a second, sorry, Carla, I did go and look at the name of the Olympian that died when she was 8 months pregnant, and it was Tori Bowie. I knew I would find the name. So that was Tori Bowie, 32 years old and 8 months pregnant. And so she was undergoing labor when she died, and they found her. And so again, she was alone. It was just so, so sad. So they still said the cause of death is still fully unknown. It's not fully known. But yeah, she was 8 months, and they considered that she had went into labor, but she was alone, 8 months pregnant when she died. And so I think they said it was a stroke, but they still don't know the cause. 32 years old, Olympian.
Wow.
Yeah.
Condolences to her family as well. All right, so let's get into culture.
Yes.
All right, so you mentioned Black Twitter, how they are reclaiming, and I say Twitter, I know it's X, but I like Twitter. I like Black Twitter better. I like the way it sounds better.
Right.
So Black Twitter, they're reclaiming this DEI dog whistle
Oh my
that some
goodness.
racists are trying to are trying to claim. So you want to tell, what's that all about?
So it started with, I don't know, I forgot the person, the original poster who's clipped. No, I remember how it started. The Baltimore bridge collapse, the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, and someone quote tweeted the post of the Maryland bridge collapse and said, "This is Baltimore's DEI mayor. It's going to get so much worse. Prepare accordingly." And then we had a member of the Black Twitter family comment and say, DEI is the new N word, I guess. And so, of course, Black people, like people say, we're so unserious at times.
I
Our
haven't.
joy and ability to laugh in the face of, just
Mhm.
ongoing threats and racism, just at our very existence. It's just, I think it's just so commendable and applaudable. And I'm happy to be Black. My name is Ebony and it means Black, and I just love it. And so basically, back Black Twitter, after she responded to DEI, the new N word, I guess, all these memes and gifs started coming off of people saying, one is like, what's her name? Ayana saying, reminder, it's a gift from her show. And it's like her doing her hands like this, saying, reminder, I can say my DEIs, but you cannot. And then another one is like, now all my CRTs and DIs and dutiful darkies, get on that flow, get on that flow. And it's like the Outcast Andre 3000 from Hey Ya.
Mhm.
So like you know what to do. And
Yeah.
literally DEI started trending because people started using it. I think that was another one of my favorite ones was the Outcast and then Ayana. And then somebody said, shout out to my DEIs, my DEIs only are my real DEIs. And so
Right.
again, just how
Right.
people have, especially white conservatives have tried to make DEI this racist slur. It feels like DEI kind of came after woke, and before woke, it was
Yeah.
CRT, and people can't even define it. If you ask them, oh, what's CRT? What's critical race theory? Oh, what's
What's
woke?
woke? Mhm.
Oh,
They
and
can't.
now
They can't.
what does DEI, mean? Just so it was just nice to see to have a little moment of comedic relief as we all
Mhm.
because we're so unserious.
Right.
So
And
literally,
I love how we reclaim everything. Like we reclaim it all, even the N word. We reclaimed it.
yeah.
We no longer give it power. But I think that's hilarious. And I remember because I live here in the Baltimore area, and I remember when the mayor responded to that comment.
Yeah.
And he said that, they really want to say the N word, but they can't say it. They're
Mhm.
cowards. But DEI for me stands for duly
Duly
elected
elected
incumbent.
incumbent, baby. Duly elected incumbent. I was like, I know
Uh-huh.
that's right.
I know, I know. So
Him
that
and Governor Westmore, like literally, because we tried to say
uh-huh.
DI mayor, DI governor, and it's just like,
Yep,
no, no.
yep. They really I was very proud of them in that moment because they did not go down, they did not sink down to the racist level. Racists have hijacked woke and DEI. So I wanted to kind of make poke fun by sharing the comments from my threads post I did.
Yeah.
So let's see. And then I want to also just throw in the actual definition of woke. I want to make sure we plug that in as well. So do you have like because I just pulled from Wikipedia what the definition of woke was. Do you have a better definition of woke that you want to share?
I
What woke actually means?
think my husband actually he gave a definition when he gave a talk. He was talking about critical race theory and the use of woke. He did a at one of the legislative hearings here in South Carolina. Yeah, see, it's now in the dictionary. I wonder when it was actually added. But I do think it's actually a really good one. It says aware of and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. And so that's actually, yeah, that's actually like I feel like the accurate definition of
Hmm.
it. I just only say that because Wikipedia, I see that has like a 1 and 2, so they usually pull from place, and it's public contribution. So
Hmm. Yeah, it's
yeah,
not the direct source. Yeah, it's woke. The actual term woke means to be alert to racial injustices, discrimination, such as discrimination, social inequality. And it was something that kind of was originated in the African American culture, but it
yeah,
actually has been broadened to include other marginalized groups. So
yeah.
that
I
is the
do think
definition.
that they've updated the dictionary to add a second definition to say woke means disapproving. And it says it means you're politically liberal or progressive, as in matters of racial and social justice, especially in a way that's considered unreasonable or extreme. Yeah, so I don't know why Merriam-Webster dictionary felt the need to add that
Yeah,
when
because that's
whatever.
that kind of ties into what racists have done to the word. They've hijacked that word to be their own dog whistle. So to poke fun of that, I went to I posted on Threads, um, that Xavier is disabled, Magneto is
Yeah.
Jewish, Jean and Rogue are women, Storm is a Black woman, Morph is non-binary, Jubilee is Asian, and the head writer, Bo DeMaio, is a Black gay man. So
Mm-hmm.
so I got over 3,000 likes and over 500 replies. And then some of those were my replies as well. But it's just it kind of it people most of the people that responded got what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
Basically poking fun at this idea that, go woke, you go broke. Nobody wants to see woke stuff. And it really when racists use the word woke, they're really talking about no one wants to see stories about Black people. No one wants to see stories about
Mm-hmm.
gay people. No one wants to see stories about, you know, disabled or whatever, mind you. So I poke fun of that. Basically, every X-Men has something that makes
Yeah.
them that in our society it makes them a part of the marginalized groups. So I
Right.
wanted to read some of the comments that I think were hilarious. So someone said that, someone mentioned how Cable it actually this is not hilarious. It's a very thought-provoking comment. Cable is disabled. Cable is the
Mm-hmm.
child of Scott and
God.
Madeline in
Yeah.
X-Men 97.
Mm-hmm.
And so Cable is disabled. He never gives up. He's so driven and full of purpose to the point of being no nonsense with people who dispute things with him. He's got no time for debating and he's all about action. Someone else said Wolverine is Canadian. Nightcrawler, he's ugly. Beast is a blurred. And I was like, a blurred? um, Mystique is trans. Let's see what else. Colossus is Russian. Wolverine is Canadian. Someone else says Canadian, like it's a bad thing. Storm is African. Nightcrawler is German. Banshee is Scottish. Wolverine is a psychologically troubled man with a terrible and mostly unknown to him. Someone else mentioned that Wolverine is also kind of like a poster or child of what, someone, a veteran. He has PTSD, he's
Yeah.
angry, and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. Let's see what else. And someone says Cyclops and Rogue are also disabled. Because they can't, Cyclops can't see without his, he can't
Yeah.
pretty much can't see. And then Rogue, she's disabled because she can't touch people. But it was a really fun thread. All these people are, just pretty much are poking fun at these races. Like, and these same races are probably loving on X-Men 97. They just don't see the hypocrisy of loving X-Men 97 and at the same time, frowning on these projects that are Black led or women led or, things like that. So um it was just a really funny thread. So I just wanted to kind of comment.
It's funny. I mean, it's crazy because it shows you how people aren't even familiar with the actual like comics. And so it's
Mhm,
like these characters aren't new. This is a continuation. That's why it's X-Men 97. So it's not a reboot or a remake. It's a revival of the
mhm,
series. So it's continuous
mhm,
where it left off. So it just shows you how much people are trying to just claim something as woke for being inclusive, which is just so weird because it's like
mhm,
inclusivity is a bad thing. And it's like, okay, then we'll use
mhm.
your new generation definition of woke and use it to mean that we're kind and considerate and everyone's welcome. Like what? I saw somebody else too say Wolverine, he's Canadian because he's like an example for healthcare. And it's like, yeah, exactly. Y'all want to be mad about that. Be mad that we still don't have like free healthcare for everybody in this developed
Right.
Milky Way galaxy
Ghetto.
ghetto. Milky Way ghetto. Okay, I
Um,
updated my location to Milky Way ghetto because like they need to come save me. Please come rescue me.
and what's funny, Deathbird, I didn't know this, because like I said, I'm just now getting to the comics, um, Deathbird actually has a child with Bishop in the comic.
Oh,
So I'm like, wait a
what?
minute, what is she must ain't met Bishop yet. Talk about some Milky
Ooh,
Way
like
ghetto.
Stephanie said, the drama. This is spicy. Deathbird and Bishop got a
Yes,
baby.
yes. I saw that on Cleo Thomas's page. He made a he was making fun of the fact that, Deaf Bird is like, calling us ghetto, but yet she just had a baby with Bishop.
Well,
So
the ghetto was good enough for you to make
I
a
know, girl.
baby.
I know, but I love it. I love X-Men. It's so much drama. I love it.